and welcome to the Climb with Kelsey. I am here with Flora of Flora Gibson Photography, and Flora is so talented. You're gonna have to check her out on her Instagram. It's Flora Gibson Photography. But Miss Flora is a storyteller who believes in the small moments being the most important ones and feels the most inspired by these wide open, rugged landscapes that are up in there and these small, intimate moments that she experienced with her couples and their sweet little family. So Flora was a nurse who transitioned to a full-time photographer a few years ago. She's got a love of sushi. She and I have that in common. Skiing and all things film related. She's also got a Facebook group that you should totally check out. I hang out there as well because she gives all these like really helpful tips. It's Photography, Connection, Art, and Inspiration by Flora Gibson Photography. So she coaches about business, life, and photography. Flora, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Me too. So I'm trying to normalize the like, this is a show. So when I say welcome to the show, thanks for being on the show, it's me trying to like be like, I don't know, Jimmy Kimmel or someone.
I love it. I love it. It's good. First show I've ever been on.
Thank you. Welcome. Welcome to the show. So we are going to be talking about today, like how we stay creative. And as you know, both of us being creative photographers, it's sometimes really hard to keep that energy going from day to day, month to month, year to year, season to season. Like this time of the year specifically, we're chatting in November. There's a lot of burnout that I think a lot of creatives are experiencing. I know I do this time of year. So how do you stay creative as an artist, Flora? Like, what does that kind of look like for you?
Yeah, full disclosure before I say anything, I still struggle with this. So I don't have a blanket answer to solve everyone's problems. I haven't solved my own, but I can definitely share what I do to kind of help the situation and things I do to kind of get out of that funk. So first and foremost, I love switching up my lenses. So I normally shoot with my 28 and 58, and I really find myself sometimes, my favorite lens is the 28. I love, and my mind works in a wide capacity. And so, you know, especially when I'm in the redwoods or something, my mind's thinking, how can I show off this beautiful location, these tall trees? And I think wide. But some of my favorite photos and the photos that have really inspired me and pushed me have been like choosing my 85 to shoot in the forest and kind of making the forest surround the couple with the couple as the center instead of the landscape as the center. And so focusing on the couple, even when you're in a beautiful landscape, helps me sometimes.
I mean, that's just the art too. I mean, for me, it's so interesting because I tend to have the opposite problem. Like I care so much about like the laughter and like the emotion that's happening from a couple that I'll just like put on a 50 or even like a 7 as far as a 70 to 200, and I will like,
and I hate my 70 to 200. I use it for bigger weddings, but I don't love it.
Yeah, like never see it. But I love the 70 to 200 to compress those mountains. So I'm in, you know, Montana and even like in Iceland, Italy, like all these like huge mountains, and you want it to look like bigger than life. And so you put that 70 to 200 on there, and it's like, oh, and it's just like it's like you're just like 2 inches away from it. I just love it. But that's one that I end up putting on my 35 so I can back up, right? Because you tend to shoot wide and need to go in. I tend to shoot tight and need to go wide. So it's super interesting. And there's all the like photography nerd speak that we can handle in an hour condensed into 2 sentences from Kelsey.
100%. And this year I've been really pushing myself to drag my shutter. I've been loving blurry images. I know that's a trend right now, and I don't always suggest hopping on every trend, but I love the movement and the feeling of them, especially when 90% of their gallery is in focus. Having that 10% that has a feeling and a grit to it, kind of like film, I think is so fun, and my clients have really been loving it this year. So
it's so fun because you pose it. I find myself even interacting with couples differently to produce that photo.
Yes,
than I usually would, and like that's just a whole other creative outlet for me because I usually kind of have this like, you know, I mean, it's not a cookie cutter because everyone is so different and every couple place, but like you kind of have your like go-to stuff.
Yes,
I end up just kind of getting stuck in that sometimes. And that drag
Agreed.
shutter.
I struggle.
Yeah.
I totally struggle with same poses, same movement based prompts. And so I'm always trying to get myself out of that. And I think the drag shutter and asking them to run into the water, to move this way or that really helps kind of break that up and almost can introduce a different version for me. So I can ask them, I'll then get inspired to ask them to do something else after the blurred photo. So it gives me kind of like a second to be creative. So I really like that.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. And honestly, like it just gives me a chance to slow down.
Yeah.
I end up going so fast, I feel like sometimes. I don't think my couples would pin that out. Like I don't think they'd be like, oh, I feel rushed. But like I can recognize that I'm doing it. And when I have the ability to like slow down and have fun, it's so much better. Like even like the prism, I will whip out a prism and it's just like game changer. It's like I see the light differently. I see everything just like the composition differently. It's so much fun. Like that is one of my like super fun little projects.
This Black Friday, I got the tinfin 8-star lens filter. Have you seen those?
No, I don't think so. We'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah, they look really fun. Basically, especially in like direct light with like details of shoes or flash, they look really fun. Like it makes all stars basically within the highlights. Cool. And so I'm excited to play with that. And I know I shoot with like tinfin Pro Mists. Have you ever tried those?
Yep. Those are great.
Just to like soften the light, especially indoors. I really love those. I need to actually bust those out again, but those help a lot just to stay creative when I'm shooting inside.
For sure. I mean, it's less for elopements, but we've all had those big weddings where like there's a trash can off to the side, or there's like, excuse my French, like shit over here. It's like kind of in the way. And so I would get, it was the 3-sided triangle prism. Use it for science projects. Like it's not even camera related, but I bought one because I'm like, I'm so sick and tired of like touching this out. So I would put the prism over the problem in the camera. So like camera here, prism in the lens. Just fix, it's like an art project where there was a trash can.
See, a lot of times I'll pick like a weed or a piece of grass or flower. And like if there's like a sign in the background of like a park, I'll definitely put that over my lens so I don't have to clone that out in post.
Yes, it's brilliant. Well, and it like, again, like a whole new thing for creativity too, because you have a foreground element now that you just would have forgotten completely about.
Yes, exactly. I will hold a pampas grass stalk and like move it over my lens slowly.
So we have like pampas grass like in our pocket or like in our hair right here. You know why. It's not for fashion, everyone.
Absolutely.
Immediate foreground immediately. Oh, that's so funny. So what, I guess, like, how about like gifts? What are you feeling about those? I know I use them like creatively, like when I'm kind of stuck, I end up slowing down and doing some gifts, but how about you?
So last year I definitely did them. I probably did 10 or so last year. But this year I've really been getting away from them. Playing in Photoshop when I was making GIFs out of like 20 images was just not the business.
Painful. Yeah.
It was painful. And I feel like I just moved too much too. I was doing them with champagne shots and you have to crop in, and then I would like export it and realize I hadn't cropped correctly. So just not my personality. I think I'm really getting away from those. What I do wish I did more of this year was more double exposures.
Oh, in camera?
In camera or out.
Because I was gonna say, a lot of your creativity comes from your editing process.
Yes, definitely.
Right? Like both. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So like when I have made those double exposures that I really love, I'm definitely shooting for them. So I'll get low, so my couple has nothing in the background, and then I'll shoot a landscape and kind of overlay it in Photoshop and post. And I'm definitely shooting for the Photoshop, but I'm doing the creative work in post. I just find it easier to focus and make it exactly what I want later, as my mind's like racing as the couple's standing there often staring at me.
You're like, I don't want them to be bored or like, you know.
As I'm like pressing the buttons in my camera. Wait, I need to do a double exposure. Hold on.
I don't do it in camera either. I think like there are certain magicians who can do that. I am not one of them.
Same. I would like to change though. I would definitely like to do it more. I just haven't I haven't done it yet.
And maybe that's our next like creative challenge.
Yes,
is like
absolutely.
doing a multiple exposure, a double exposure in camera with couple.
Yes, 100%. And I think last year I was shooting in Santa Cruz and there was this like, I think you might have seen the photo, but it basically looks like the couple standing in the middle of a sandstone wall. And I made a joke on Instagram, like, I love repelling clients, but really they were standing on this little ledge that was like a foot above the sand, and I just photoshopped it. I duplicated the top to the bottom so they were centered on that. And it was when I was shooting it, I knew exactly what I was going to do. So I was thinking, I'm definitely going to raise them up and make this look a little more epic than it actually is.
So cool. I'll do that with drone shots. So I'll have my couple, I mean, somewhere safe, where they feel good, laying down. You get the drone over top, you take a shot, and then I'll do this epic like coastline of like zoomed out, but you can see the whole coastline. It's really rocky. Like, in no world would it be safe to go out to those rocks and put a human on it. Like, it's just, it's just not. And so I just photoshopped them on this like epic rockscape where they never would have been. And it's just so fun.
You have a better system figured out for that than me, because what I end up doing is doing the drone shot with the couple actually on the rocks, but I want to make it look like the rock is isolated by water. And so then I start like photoshopping water in, which takes way longer than just
my God, Flora.
I know. You have it right.
Yeah, that would take so long. I mean, talk about like magician. You're just like making water where there isn't any. That's amazing.
I'm just like copying pieces of water, trying to get them, like airbrushing them on.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, but like with my only recommendation with, well, there's a few, but like when you're going, as like when you're compositing people onto environments that like they weren't already, like watching where the light source is and matching the light source directionally is really important. Like that's like the first thing that's gonna get weird, right?
100%. I can see that.
Yeah. So I ended up doing like a lot of sorcery in Facebook, like or Facebook in Photoshop. I'll like add light to the images and shadows. So it like melds cooler. Yeah. So like they sit in it better. And then also like just making sure that the environment that they're laying on and the environment you're putting them on is about the same. So like if you have like, if they're surrounded by grass and there isn't grass on this rock, you're either gonna have to cut all that out, which I don't recommend, because then you're gonna have to fix it, like put in a shirt.
I feel like that's the big reason I haven't done it.
Yeah, it's a lot. Like rock on rock is usually what I like to do. So there's just no question that they'll be able to fit on there.
Yes.
And of course camera angle, like just go straight up and down.
Yeah. 100%.
Otherwise you're gonna be messing with a ton of other stuff. So yeah. But that's like, I mean, as soon as the drone comes out for me, like that's a creative.
Oh, absolutely. Oh yeah. And I can just see the landscape in such a different way than I could otherwise without the drone. A lot of times, like just that aerial view just like amazes me. I was born and raised here, but sometimes flying my drone, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful.
Yeah. Like you kind of forget what you're looking at when you're just walking around like an ant versus a bird.
Yeah.
Like, crazy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Crazy. So talk to me a little bit about how you stay creative in your editing process with like cropping and just kind of more like traditional editing, because I know a lot like your power comes from that, and I think it's just like talk me through your process of what that usually looks like.
Yeah, well, I love cropping in. So a lot of times I will like the way, the groom's touching the bride or tucking her hair. And so like zooming in on that, I'll find real beautiful. And I love doing that. And I know I've done like a lot of different creative shoots like in Photoshop where I've blurred the whole background in a really, fake way where it's not meant to look like a blur. It's really meant to look almost like surreal art. And so I've been proud of myself kind of like stretching my creative muscles in that way.
Yeah.
And then like, as far as like editing, just basically without going into Photoshop, you know, my RGB panel is really what I pay attention to, and like creating my own presets from an RGB panel that is already pretty good. And having, I know me and you have talked about this a little bit before, but having like several different presets for if I'm in the forest, if I'm in Big Sur, if I'm in Oregon, you know, those are constantly changing.
Right.
And I need to constantly be changing my greens and my yellows and my oranges within that.
Yeah. I
And
think that's kind of a common, like, not misconception, but like people kind of forget that you don't have to have one and then just be like melding it, right? Like you can have
right,
several presets
yes,
for each environment. And like elopement photographers specifically, we're shooting in such like different backdrops and such like color, like the color in environment is so different from place to place. So that it just
yes,
it
even within the forest of like Big
yes.
Sur to the Pacific Northwest and up north, the greens are so different. And people are always saying, you know, how do you stay consistent? I think consistency is boring. I'm
Yeah.
constantly changing my preset. And if you, some people just don't notice, most people don't
Well,
notice. I
most don't,
notice.
right? Yeah. I mean, like as
Yeah,
photographers,
yeah,
like we're trained to like have that color profile and like know
yes,
like, oh, it's too magenta or you know, whatever nerd speak. And for me, like I
exactly.
care so much about like my editing style starts with the whites. Like I'll kind of look at like what is white and then kind of
Yeah.
warm it from there. And then
Oh,
just kind of like
interesting.
based on the environment, like that obviously like that changes. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just kind of a really
Yeah.
fun, yeah. And I love the cropping in too. That's the other thing I really like
Yeah.
is just adding some grain in there so it looks a bit
Yep.
more like film and just like getting in there. I tend to shoot more like that. So I think
Yeah.
that's something that I'll probably like play around with the next time I'm out is like really backing off. So I have the room to come in versus only coming in. And I
Right.
don't
And
ever
you
need to come
can't,
out because you can't uncrop.
yeah, exactly. And with our cameras now, I mean, you can really crop in there.
Hmm.
And I like the grain. I think that for a while I was so scared to add grain. I thought that clients would think it was low quality. Now I'm totally adding grain to almost everything.
Oh yeah, it's
I
just
think it
art.
prints so much more beautiful too, not just on digital, but the actual print of it looks and feels better.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. I agree.
Yeah.
So moving on a little bit to the like day to day of like sustaining creativity. Because again, like we kind of talked about like burnout is real. We both struggle with it. I think
Yes.
every artistic person, creative struggles. Like, how do you find time within your day to either like take a break and not have burnout or like really look like dive into that creative like that creative part of you?
Yeah, I think that for me, I find that if I stay on top of my editing and I'm almost editing the next day from something I shot the day before, I feel more creative. I'm more excited about it. If I let it sit too long, I get bored and I want to pump it out almost like a machine as opposed to an artist. And so I found myself really liking to hone in on staying on track of what I just shot and editing almost the next day. I'm usually really excited about it.
Yeah,
And
well,
I'll
and
spend the time.
it doesn't give you that like angst of like, oh my gosh, I like
Right.
have to get this done because it's due in 2 days. I mean,
Right.
it just it
Exactly.
gives you more freedom.
Exactly. I almost never hit deadlines. So I give myself like 8 to 12 weeks contractually, and I usually always deliver in 2 to 3.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Me too. Like under
Yeah,
promise, over deliver. I mean,
absolutely.
that's the
And
name of the game.
it helps me creatively because it allows me that time to really focus on that client and that shoot.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And even like, at least for me, like how I'm able to like keep my sanity and creativity is like I build in a daily schedule that has like a big chunk of time for creative projects and larger fun projects
Oh,
and
that's
also
awesome.
rest. So like rest for me is like, I'll get on the treadmill and run, or I'll go for a
Yes.
hike, or I'll
And
get
I'm
on the
terrible
bike.
at this. You are the queen of this. I am absolutely ADD brain. I am answering emails, I'm going back to editing, then I'm on my website updating something, and then I'm back on editing. And it's just the
Yeah,
way my brain works.
totally. But like, I mean, that
And
really inspires.
I don't have a good self-care regimen, especially when I'm super busy.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is always the first to go with
Yes.
like all of my friends that I'll talk to. I'm just like, self-care, like exercise, like resting, how are
What's
we
that?
doing? And they're like, nope, none of those things. Don't know what
That
that
only
means.
happens in January and February.
Yeah. Which like, I mean, I completely understand like how that can happen. I'm a huge proponent of like, if you do not take that time to rest and have this like power schedule where you can really like take care, you are going to be less productive when you are at
Yes,
work. So if
it's
you,
true.
yeah, I mean, and so every time I'm just like, you little angel, like take the time, because even if you can't do it for you, do it for your clients, because you will be
Yeah.
like much more productive and more creative for them if you're able to carve out
Yeah.
that time in a meaningful way. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
100%. I've read like all the productivity books that totally support what you're talking about. I think that really, truly in my mind and my happiness, I like to have like 15 balls in the air. I think
yeah,
it's just
yeah,
kind of the way I work, and I'm
totally.
much happier than forcing myself when I don't feel like editing, but I've blocked off that time to edit. Or if
Mm.
I'm in a sticky, sometimes I don't know about you, but I've definitely stayed up super late editing. Then I come back to it the next day and I'm like, what did you do? This is horrible. And I re-edit
This
everything.
looks terrible. Yeah.
This is terrible.
See, I'm
The
like,
temperature is all off.
yeah. And again, like this is the only, like we're the only ones who are going to notice that. No client or
Yes.
photographer is going to be like that temperature, but like we care so much, and that's the art. Like that's the art of it right there. Yeah,
Right. Absolutely.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of like finding a groove that works well for you and your own like creativity. It doesn't work well for everyone to
Yes.
have this like uber structure going on. So like if you found a place that works, then like you need to do it, but make the time for your like passion and your creativity and yourself.
Absolutely.
That's
And
always my
myself.
like,
Oh, absolutely. Going
yeah.
into next year, that's the goal. That's
Yes,
truly.
nice, nice.
Yes.
All right, Miss Flora. So everybody, thank you, Miss Flora, for coming on the show. Please
Thank you for having
find,
me.
yes, oh, the show. Please find her on Facebook. Again, her Facebook group is Photography Connection, Art and Inspiration by Flora Gibson Photography. And then check her out on Instagram. It's Flora Gibson Photography is her little handle. And she'll have lots of like art for you to Google and coaching and everything to
All the fun
keep
stuff
you
to
all the fun
connect.
stuff. Yeah. So thank you
Yeah.
again, Flora.
Thank you so much, Kelsey.